Yeah, thanks a lot for the introduction. Quite something, but I'm still a human and I'm living. I'm glad I am. So I would have loved to just, continue talking and discussing because there are so many things that you said that I would just like to, continue discussing with you. But let me just go through these couple of slides here first, and then we can, discuss all of these things. Briefly, just something about our company. Yes, 20 years kind of is true, but not into games, sadly. So actually, I did not study film. I studied something in between. So I already had a background from, being a student and from research later on at the Film University that, covers not just film, but also interactive and games. But that didn't really prepare me a lot of doing both. And it seems like, as you say, it's complicated being a film and a game person at the same time, and putting, the two of them in a room requires beer. That's kind of true, and we tried that, and it kind of works as well. But of course, that's not the solution. So we got a couple of titles here, and we're also doing, VR and AR stuff since a couple of years. And just to give you some impression about the logos, so there's on the left, there's obviously film logos, and on the right, there's obviously, game logos. But interestingly enough, the left side, pushes into the right side because even Cannes, since 2 years, they have a section called Next, and that is, covering games and interactive stuff, and Berlin as well this year. So they have a big and growing VR section, which is nice. However, on the right side, I haven't seen anyone, at Gamescom talking about film so much. So maybe, being a more kind of a filmmaker in your heart at this point, I would say, why not, why don't the games people, try to go more and understand more of the film people? They do at some point, and as the pockets get deeper, that of course is in the interest of the film people as well, as we both struggle. But creating own IPs, original IPs, or adapting IPs from one to the other is something quite challenging, and I will be discussing this with you later on. But I have two examples here, and interestingly enough, this is also a Nordic example because that's a co-production with Sweden, and it's an original IP that actually comes from the music industry. So there was a record firstly done by a quite famous jazz band in Stockholm, and they created a record for kids first. Especially for kids, a jazz record. And they created also a children's book. And actually, I have it with me. If you want to have a look at it later, I have it with me. And we're also looking for a publisher for Germany for the book. So if there's lots of publishers here in the city. So if there's any interest, please give me a shout out. This project is something that started probably 6 years ago. So as you can see, things can take long, and also production-wise, it's really hard to do things side by side, doing a film production and a games production, because not just is the financing different and the production and the team is different, also how long it takes is quite different, and it's quite challenging when you consider, independent financing of a film and of a game. They can, take shortcuts or it can take longer, so it's quite tough to predict or to try to launch a game and a film at the same time, so a day-and-date launch. Only the big ones, like the Batmans, and so they can really do it, but even they, in the past, were not able to deliver at the same time, because there's just so many things that can go wrong in a film production and in a games production. So this is there's an IP that's an original IP, so it's their own, created with an English artist and the jazz band. So everything is based actually on the record and on the drawings. And then there was a lot of different things that we made out of that. There was, of course, the book and the record. Then there was a TV series that was commissioned, and it's going into second season now. And there was the digital app and the games that we really came into play. And of course, there's interactive concerts. So those things as you discussed before, losing control, trying to keep control or letting it go, that's really difficult if you have, let's say, a showrunner or let's say director who feels this is his baby and he wants control over everything. But let's say he's a filmmaker, doesn't know much about games, but he wants to have final control over everything because it's his baby, also in the game side. Then it really becomes challenging. That's a similar, discussion. It doesn't really matter if you outsource, if you license it to a third party to do a game, or if you do it internally. The battle is kind of the same. There's less legal battle, but there's still a battle on the, content side and on the conception side. And this is the book. You have a chance to have a look at it later on if you like. This is the TV series. There's 13 tracks on this record. And for each of the tracks, there is a distinctive animation, a short animation, a really nice story of two animal friends. It's very positive. There's no dialogue, but there is, they overcome hurdles, they help each other. It's really, really nice for preschool. And it's been a really big success. Both the book has been a really, really big success in Sweden and in France, and the TV series as well. Yeah. So next thing is the film. So there was also a film made out of kind of, not the best of, but kind of made from the TV series, and it was submitted to Berlin, and it was happily accepted in Berlin last year. And so we had kind of a test crowd for the film, which was quite nice, actually, to see all these screaming young kids and their worried adults, parents, sitting in a room saying, "No, don't shout! It's a screening," But of course, kids don't care, so they cheered up when their favorite animals, be it a hippo or the elephant, had a fun time on screen. And also, we used that occasion to talk and get feedback for the game. Would you like to have a game for that? How could that be? How could that work? And interestingly enough, the kids were much more interested than the parents. So, which comes back to the conclusion that in terms of media usage, parents quite often still, would allow their kids, or say, yeah, let's have like 10 minutes of screen time of television each day, or I get you the iPad and you can watch your favorite series. But game, that's when their parents quite often get a little bit more reserved, and kids don't. So that's kind of a little hurdle we had. But interestingly enough, we then created also 13 games. So for each episode, for each track, we create a game. And of course, that's kind of a challenge, but it's a casual, small little game, so it's not really, very complicated. We were looking for mechanics that, for that target group and for that story world or story universe, how you would call that in the old term of transmedia, how would that work, and how would it be fun? Of course, we want it to be fun. It's for kids. And that was kind of going back and forth for quite some while, and that was way after the television series was made. That was really way after that. So we were never intending, because we knew we wouldn't be able to release that at the same date. And that's some of the concept, because of course it's a jazz band. It's a famous jazz quintet. They toured through the world. They got really lots of awards for what they do, and they of course do interactive concerts. So they use also their concerts, sold out stages all throughout France, to promote what they do, including the book, including the series and all of that. And that's something, of course, that I think is a very positive aspect of using, using one IP to different mediums, because it all connects to kind of the same target group, but then again, to a different side of it. Because that's something you would never achieve if you say, we just rely on television. Because people who go to a concert are a different group of people, mostly. So there's overlapping, and it wouldn't be a congress, a conference, and I wouldn't be trying to buy into your hearts, but not into your pockets, if I were not to give you a little bit of free, gifts. So if you Google, or if you go into the Play or Apple Store, then you'd be able to download the games from today or tomorrow, depending on when they actually release it, until next Monday for free. So you'll be saving a lot of money if you want. Of course, be really great if you, and all of the audience down there, if on Facebook and YouTube, be also reviewing, giving us feedback, what you like, what you don't like, how we can further develop it, because of, we're all learning. We started being a game studio maybe 3 years ago or something. So we're quite small, and we would have never probably been able or had the courage to found our own game studio that does nothing else than that, because being an indie studio nowadays is getting quite complicated. Next thing, that's a project that's going on for even longer. It all started in 2014, where with the idea of taking one of these social interesting topics nowadays in our society, be it civil courage, or how do we deal with the Holocaust and tolerance in our society, and put that into something that will move and educate people. And so we found a Holocaust survivor, quite famous lady, Charlotte Knobloch, who is a big ambassador for the cause, and is very open and demanding also new forms of media to remember and to activate and get into touch with the young people, especially for this topic. So what we did, we created a short film, because short films are really great for schools and for education, and we created a DVD together with Matthias Film, which is a German distributor, especially for educational purposes, and with lots of material for teachers and all of that, to distribute in schools and for educational events. And then we thought, well, our target group, yes, they do watch films, but what else do they do? Of course, they play games. So I was too fast, but this is just one other reason. So this photograph probably everyone knows, right? Or many of you probably know. This young boy back then was, or is, hopefully still alive. Most of the Holocaust survivors are not very long, or most of them are not alive, anymore. But in education, and not just in Germany, but also in the US and other countries, first, witnesses' stories are key for education. Because in the end, it's very important for kids to listen to stories from people who have really, gone through all of that. And when that's missing, then there is a gap. And how to fill a gap? You can't fill a gap of a living person. So how can we get as close as possible in a way that's not yet been done before? A game. But if you tell to a publisher, hey, let's do a game about the Holocaust, yep, that's something a lot of people would probably not willing to invest in so easily. So of course it gets a little bit more complicated than what we did. So first was the short film. That was kind of our proof of concept. That was kind of, yes, there's the story world, there's the characters, there's a story. And then, of course, there was a song contest. So we did a little bit of PR and with the co-producing Bayerischer Rundfunk. And then we created a multiplayer online game that, doesn't really use the story world, which is something we probably can discuss on, but it kind of deviates from it, but uses the same topic and the same principles to teach about tolerance and civil courage. And then there's the interactive VR game, because we thought, well, what's the most immersive thing nowadays? What's going to be what's in schools already through Google Cardboard? What's possible, and what's in museums, and what's hopefully going to be a future trend? VR. Everyone predicts, still, the curve's not as we all wanted, but still the predicted curve for VR is quite interesting. And so that's the first short film we did. We did it in stereoscopic 3D. That was kind of a interesting thing for us because we want to innovate in what we do. We didn't want to just do a short film, although that was quite challenging enough. We also wanted to do something new because stereoscopic is also more immersive in some ways than a traditional flatty film. And the next evolution would be virtual reality. This is a screenshot from the browser game. It's actually the story of a class of, 20 people, a school class, that goes on a journey. In real life, it's 1 week, so it's homework. So this game is homework. You don't play it in school, you play it as homework. So everyone hates homework. Playing games as a homework doesn't sound like such a bad idea, right? But the principles of how this ship is run by the captain and by the crew, and you being among the crew, is exactly how the Nazis actually built their system from 1933 on, how they treated people, how they treated minorities, how they treated Jews. So in the end, you'll be tempted into moral dilemmas. You have to decide, do you let someone go? How do you do to survive? How do you get to the next level? All of these things are in the game, without mentioning even that it's about, being a Jew or not being a Jew, about the Holocaust. Because if you say, hey, let's play a game about the Holocaust, and you're a Jew, then of course your way of playing is a little bit different, usually. You wouldn't be so free-minded to just do what you want to do. You would be, be historically predetermined what you're going to be doing. That's something we did, and that's the VR game that's in development. Also, thanks to a couple of funds, but let's talk about the thank yous later. And we thought, well, okay, VR is very immersive, and you have these controllers and all of that, but why did Oculus and Vive have a microphone? What is even more immersive? Is it, clicking like the text adventures on, ABC3, or is it what else can we do? So we are developing a system that is able of you being in an adventure, commanding and guiding and walking through it with voice recognition and with gesture recognition. So if someone says hands up and you don't put your hands up in VR, like in reality, you probably get shot and you die. And there's many other things like that. So you really have a discussion with those people. And we hope, and our tests so far show, that is even more natural, because the UI in VR, using controllers to choose what you do next, is, let's say, not very natural. And we want to change that. Let's see. I mean, there's always a fallback. So if someone just, has a very strong accent like me when I speak English, then it's obviously also possible to, use text. And that's basically it. That was because I'm in Hamburg. I thought I'd bring up this photo because that's from the premiere of Call Her Lotte, the film in Berlin, in the Zoopalast. Together with some people you might know. In the middle is our protagonist, Charlotte Knobloch. And then, the one guy that you probably know, that's me, just without a suit now. And then there is Willy Geike and Mr. Sommer and the ambassador of the US in Berlin. And of course, everyone knows the other person. So there's a lot of political will, so to say, to create educational material, serious games. There's a serious games conference in Hanover, and there's a lot of that happening, and lots of VR and games are made for education. So education is a big market, and as you said before, you also think that, education can be something that is worth tapping into. And that's when we talk about art versus business, and how to finance it, because obviously also public funding bodies so far have, to weigh in between what to fund. Is it art? Is it, is it for education, or is there a market? Because if there's no market, if no one plays it in the end, okay, the same discussion like with public TV. Should they, think what should they, show or care what the ratings are? But I guess what I'm trying to get across here. It's really difficult, and we're still here, and I'm happy. So you should all try, to do something similar or even better than us. And that's basically it.
Thank you very much, Michael. And we'll now having some questions from your side. Well, I'll start with one. There are lots of bits and different pieces to this transmedia puzzle. Do you have some umbrella project management tying it all together, or is it that you just start with one thing and find a partner so everything falls into place by chance, or is there some master plan behind it?
Well, let's say it's quite seldom that we have an idea and we say, well, that's perfect for multi-platform. That's a perfect IP to put games and everything else in. It usually starts from one side, be it a scriptwriter coming to us saying, that's a great idea, or ourselves thinking, that's a great idea. We should think that through, and then afterwards we think of, okay, where to put it, and where else to put it. And of course, it's very different if it's in our own IP and we prefer really using our own IPs or fresh new IPs. Although, it's interesting. We've not yet worked so much with buying into IPs, but now at MIP TV and in Cannes, there is...
MIP TV is a fair where you can buy rights.
Yeah, MIP TV is like the biggest television affair next week. And they're not just doing, linear stuff anymore. And of course, series is a big thing. And it's interesting because when everyone was thinking and talking about series and how so much more important now the story world, or the world, gets compared to film where no one was really talking about worlds so much, I was remembered of, hey, series seems to be something like, as you say, a similar starting point on how you draw the first sketches compared to a game in a way, although mechanics don't play so much of a role when it comes to a series. So I would say it's really rare that, something comes to us and it's natural fit for everything. Of course, there's
probably also tied to the money then. If there is public funding, we will be having games funding soon from the federal level. We'll see where that leads us.
I didn't want to get into that, but yes, of course. One of the reasons why it's really healthy for us still being a film production company as well is because funding for games should be really more in Germany. Look at our neighbors, yeah, that's my point.
Any more questions? There is one, please.
Yeah, you mentioned that, as I can assume, that it's hard to convince somebody to do a game about the Holocaust. And I wonder whether that might be just due to the word game. Did you have any internal discussions about whether you present it as a game or an interactive experience? Because I could assume that many people would just directly think of that it has to be fun and it has to be entertaining and so on. Did you have any?
Yeah, well, the wording is very different depending on whom we talk to. So, of course, if we talk to a museum, we call it experience. And when we talk to educators, we call it experience. And if we talk to people who are really fond of games and understand very much more the depth of what a game can be and what a serious game means, then we call it serious game. Yeah.
Yeah, you wanted to tell us a little bit more about the thank yous, like where you got your funding from
sorry,
for various
yes.
things. No, second question. At what stage did you get, or at what point did you approach someone like Ms. Knobloch and Willy Geike?
Okay, well, the thank yous, I'm sorry. Thank you for the game goes to Hanover, so Nordmedia does not also fund film, but also games. And they have a focus on serious games, which is quite interesting. And then also to the Leipzig Fund, MDM, they also fund games. And also Hamburg, and I think nearly every film fund in Germany now also has a game section. And at the European film market in Berlin this year, there was the Norwegian Film Fund, and it was the only fund I could find in the whole European film market who had on their banner also that they fund games. That was quite funny. So I think there is a move. There is, of course, it's a battle between budgets. All the film producers, don't want their money to go into games, and the game industry also want, a little bit share of that, cultural and state money. But that's basically a funding scheme. And then, of course, we are hoping so much that there is a federal game funding coming soon. And then there's lots of co-production. So most of our TV or theatrical films are co-productions with different countries. So New Zealand, UK, Sweden in this example, Spain, France. So there's many, many options. It's just a puzzle. And in the games industry, that's not so super common to do, but I've seen co-productions between Denmark and other Scandinavian countries, and I think even between Germany. So, and now since Scandinavia took a big place in Planegg in near Munich with Koch, I hope that with THQ there will be more cooperation between the Scandinavian countries and Germany coming up. And yeah, and the other second question, Charlotte Knobloch, because it's kind of her inspired by her life story. She was in from the very first moment, and thanks to her, we got a connection to Warner Brothers, and of course the cause and the message was very much to what also they believe in, and they thought they'd just help us, giving us a helping hand. That was really, really great, the job they did. Yeah.
One last question. Anybody? No? Thank you very much, Michael. Vielen Dank. Dankeschön. Michael Geide.